Look at this man, 69 years old, standing in -40 acts in one hand. Refrigerator door open in the other. Snow up to his knees, and he is smiling, because that refrigerator, that is not a joke. That is a message. He is showing you right there in that image that his cabin is so warm, so impossibly well insulated, that he literally keeps his food cold by leaving it outside in the Alaskan winter. His name is Victor. Soviet-trained structural engineer, born in Siberia, grew up building things that had to survive temperatures that would kill most Americans before they found the thermostat. He came to Alaska at 61 8 years ago. People told him the cold here was different, meaner, more dangerous. Victor laughed. Victor laughed. He had a plan built from 40 years of Soviet cold climate engineering, a plan that nobody in Alaska had ever tried. Not exactly like this. And when the first brutal winter hit, when his neighbors were burning through a full cordwood every week just to keep their log cabins from turning into freezers, Victor's cabin registered 65 degrees warmer than every comparable structure tested around it. 65 degrees. Not with massive furnace, not with industrial heating, with a small fire, a rocket stove, and a building method so unusual, so counterintuitive, that the local homesteaders thought he had lost his Soviet mind. Today we are going deep on exactly what Victor built, how he built it, and why it works at a level that no standard Alaskan cabin can even approach. Every step matters. Every detail is load-bearing. Stay with me. Why every cabin in Alaska is fighting a losing battle. First, you need to understand the enemy. Cold is not just a temperature. In Alaska, cold is a predator. It finds every gap, every crack, every weak point, and it never stops pressing. Standard Alaskan cabins, log cabins, stick frame cabins, they all share the same fatal flaw: thermal bridging. Every log, every stud, every nail that connects the inside of your warm cabin to the outside of your frozen one is a highway for heat to escape. Wood is a decent insulator, but not decent enough when the temperature gap between inside and outside hits 90 degrees Fahrenheit or more. Then there is a shape. Rectangular boxes, easy to build, terrible to heat. A rectangle has the worst surface area to volume ratio of any common building shape. More wall exposed to the cold means more heat lost. A 600 square foot cabin can have 1,400 square feet of surface bleeding warmth into the darkness. Then there is the ground. Alaska sits on permafrost, permanently frozen earth. Cabins on wood pilings or concrete footings leave an air gap underneath. Arctic wind scours the floor from below. It is like building your house on top of an open freezer. And then there is moisture, the quiet killer. Warm interior air hits a cold wall and freezes inside the cavity. Ice forms. Insulation dies. The wall gets worse every single year. Faster and faster. The heat drains out. 4 failure modes. Every standard Alaskan cabin has all 4. Victor knew this before he set foot on Alaskan soil. He had seen every one of them in Siberia. His design defeats all 4 simultaneously. The Soviet education that changed everything. Victor grew up in Novosibirsk, one of the coldest cities on Earth with more than 1 million people. The winters there hit -50 regularly. The Soviet engineers of that era were not romantics. They were brutal problem solvers. They did not care about aesthetics. They cared about thermal physics, about whether people lived or died. Victor studied structural engineering at Novosibirsk State Technical University in the 1970s. His professors had worked on cold climate military installations, Siberian rail infrastructure, Arctic research stations, structures that had to perform in conditions that would shatter Western building assumptions. He learned something that most American builders have never been taught. The Earth is not your enemy. The Earth is your insulation. 10 feet below the Alaskan surface, the ground holds a year-round temperature of 28 to 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Even when the air above it hits -60, that ground is 60, 70, 90 degrees warmer than the winter air. A structure that harnesses that ground temperature has already won half the thermal battle before a single nail is driven. Victor had watched Soviet engineers use this principle in Siberia since the 1970s. Earth-sheltered, partially buried, integrated into the ground rather than sitting exposed on top of it like a target. He also studied shape, the arch, the dome, the curve. Soviet military engineers loved the arch, not because it was beautiful, because it was thermodynamically superior, less surface area, less heat loss, and structurally, it could survive loads that would flatten any rectangular building. When Victor arrived in Alaska and looked at the log cabins his neighbors were building, he said, in his own words, in accented English, "These people are heating the sky." He was right. He was also about to prove it. What Victor actually built, and why it looks so strange. Victor did not build a log cabin. He did not build a stick frame house. He built a Quonset arch, a cold-formed steel semicircular vault, partially buried 4 feet into the ground, spray foamed from the inside with a 12-inch shell of polyurethane, sitting on an insulated concrete slab with a rocket mass heater at its core. From the outside, in the snow, it looks like a giant metal slug half swallowed by the earth. Visitors have driven past it 3 times without recognizing it as a home. Victor does not mind. He knows what it does, and he knows why. Let us go through it piece by piece. The underground strategy, burying your way to warmth. The first thing Victor did was dig. Most Alaskan homesteaders build up. Victor built down. He excavated a pit 4.5 feet deep, slightly wider and longer than the structure's footprint. His neighbors thought he was building a root cellar. He was building a thermal fortress. Sinking the lower walls of the cabin into the earth means a majority of the structure's surface area is surrounded not by -50 air, but by soil sitting at roughly 30 degrees. The math is immediate. Brutal. A wall exposed to -50 is fighting an 80-degree differential. That same wall surrounded by 30-degree earth is fighting a 40-degree differential. Half the heat loss, before you add a single layer of insulation. But Victor knew moisture would try to kill him down there. So before any foundation work, he installed a complete French drain system, perforated pipe, gravel surround, sloped sharply away from the structure. Any water that entered the pit had exactly one place to go, away. Then 8 inches of compacted gravel on the pit floor. A capillary break. Ground moisture cannot wick upward through gravel the way it wicks through soil. Then 4 inches of extruded polystyrene rigid foam on top of the gravel. Unlike fiberglass, XPS holds its insulating value even when wet. Critical underground. Then the vapor barrier. Then the concrete slab. That slab is not just a floor. It is a battery. A 4-inch concrete slab in a 500-square-foot cabin contains enormous thermal mass. When Victor's rocket stove fires hot in the morning, the slab absorbs heat like a sponge. When the fire dies in the afternoon, the slab releases that stored warmth back into the living space for the next 8 to 10 hours. The interior temperature barely moves. It is a flywheel, a thermal buffer, and it works because of Soviet engineering principles that most American builders have never encountered. The arch, where geometry becomes your heater. Now the shape. Victor did not use thin military corrugated steel. He used a cold-formed steel arch panel system. Individual interlocking panels roll to shape on-site with a portable forming machine. Each panel locks to the next. The result is a continuous, seamless vault with no joints, no seams, no structural weak points at the corners. Because there are no corners. Why does this matter thermally? Compare a rectangular cabin to a semicircular Quonset of the same floor area. The rectangle might have 1,400 square feet of exterior surface. The arch has roughly 950 square feet. That 30% reduction in surface area means 30% less heat loss across the entire building envelope before you consider any other variable. Then consider snow. Alaskan interior snowfall can pile loads on a roof that would collapse standard residential framing. Victor's arch converts every pound of vertical snow load into compression along the steel curve. Steel in compression is essentially indestructible at residential scales. There are Quonset structures in Alaska that carried over 200 pounds per square foot of snow without a single bolt moving. Then consider wind. A rectangular cabin creates turbulent eddies at every corner, every eave. Turbulence strips heat from the building's surface through convection. Victor's arch has no corners. Wind flows around it like water around stone. The aerodynamic shape measurably reduces convective heat loss during high wind events. Victor's arch spans 30 feet, rises 15 feet at the apex. Inside, there's a full loft level. More space than it looks from outside. Every geometric advantage working together, stacking on top of each other, multiplying the thermal performance at every point of the envelope. The insulation system, 12 inches of fortress. Here's the part that makes Victor's cabin genuinely different from every other metal building in Alaska. Bare steel conducts cold roughly 300 times faster than wood. An uninsulated steel arch in an Alaskan winter will be coated in frost on the inside within minutes. You would not survive the night. Standard metal building insulation practice is to frame an interior wall system, attach bad insulation to it, and finish the surface. This creates a thermal bridge at every framing connection, every stud, every purlin, every connection point where the frame touches both the cold steel and the warm interior. In standard practice, these bridges account for 20 to 30% of total heat loss, even when the insulation between them is technically adequate. Victor eliminated every single thermal bridge. No interior framing, no studs, no purlins. Instead, closed-cell spray polyurethane foam was applied directly to the interior surface of the steel arch in a seamless, continuous, unbroken layer. 2 to 3 inches first. This layer bonds chemically to the steel. It insulates, seals, and structurally stiffens the arch simultaneously. And it has a permeance rating below 1 perm, virtually zero moisture transmission. The moisture destruction cycle that kills conventional Alaskan cabins cannot happen here, because water vapor cannot reach the steel surface. Then a second application of open-cell spray foam on top, bringing total thickness to 12 inches at the walls and 14 at the crown. Total whole wall R value, R 52. Some sections hit R 60. Compare that to a standard Alaskan stick frame wall, R 19 on a good day. Victor's walls are 3 times better. Combined with earth-sheltered lower walls, the insulated slab, and the reduced surface area of the arch, the total thermal performance is not 3 times better than a conventional cabin. It is closer to 5 or 6 times better. That is where the 65 degrees comes from. The breathing problem and the Soviet solution. Here's the thing about building an airtight structure that nobody warns you about. Seal a box that tight and put humans inside it. The air goes bad fast. Carbon dioxide builds. Humidity climbs. Condensation forms on cool surfaces. The structure starts to slowly self-destruct from the inside through moisture damage. Victor had seen this happen in Soviet-era prefab housing. Tight construction. No ventilation strategy. Buildings that rotted from the inside within 15 years despite being built to survive a nuclear winter. His solution was a heat recovery ventilator, an HRV, a mechanical device that continuously exchanges stale interior air for fresh exterior air while capturing up to 80% of the heat from the outgoing stream and transferring it to the incoming cold stream. Think about what that means. Fresh outside air at minus 40 degrees enters the HRV. By the time it reaches Victor's living space, it has been pre-warmed to roughly minus 8. You get fresh air without hemorrhaging heat. You maintain interior humidity between 30 and 45%. Low enough to protect the structure, comfortable enough for the occupant. Victor is the only person breathing fresh air in the Alaskan interior on a minus 50 night. His neighbors are either freezing with a cracked window or slowly poison themselves in a sealed box. The rocket stove, maximum fire, minimum wood. A conventional Alaskan cabin needs 40,000 to 60,000 BTU per hour to hold comfortable temperatures in deep cold. That is a big wood stove running constantly, burning through firewood at a rate that requires serious labor, serious storage, and serious money. Victor's cabin at minus 40 loses heat at roughly 9,000 BTU per hour, 1/5 the rate. This changes everything about how you heat the space. He uses a rocket mass heater, not a wood stove, a rocket mass heater. The combustion chamber is J-shaped. You feed thin sticks of wood, not logs, sticks, vertically into the short arm. The geometry of the J creates a draft so powerful that the fire burns at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit internally. Nearly complete combustion. Almost no smoke. The exhaust gases travel horizontally through a long thermal mass bench. In Victor's case, a cob stone sleeping platform 6 feet long. Before exiting through a low-temperature flue, the bench absorbs heat, stores it, radiates it for 12 to 24 hours after the fire goes out. Victor fires his rocket stove for 3 hours in the morning. Then he goes outside, chops wood, checks traps, lives his life. He comes back to a warm cabin every time. Interior temperature fluctuation over 24 hours, 4 degrees. He burns approximately 1/10 the wood of his nearest neighbor. He once went 11 days without touching his woodpile during a mild stretch in January. The thermal mass of the slab and the bench held the interior above 62 degrees the entire time on residual stored heat alone. Victor says, in his characteristic way, "American stove fight the cold. My stove does not need to fight. Building already won." His nearest neighbor burns 4 cords of wood every winter. Victor burns less than half a cord. One neighbor, a third-generation Alaskan, walked through Victor's cabin at -45 and stood in silence, then said, "I have been building raw my entire life." Victor poured him tea. 68 degrees inside. The 65-degree test, the data that shocked Alaska. Now the number, the 65 degrees. Victor had built both structures on his property, the Quonset cabin, and a conventional 16 by 20 log cabin built to standard Alaskan practice, which he used as a workshop and reference point. In January of his third Alaskan winter, a brutal cold snap arrived. Temperatures dropped to -54. Victor decided to run a test. He brought both structures to 70 degrees interior temperature. Then he shut off all heat in both, left them unoccupied, placed calibrated temperature loggers inside each structure recording every 15 minutes. He checked back at 96 hours. The log cabin interior, -16 degrees Fahrenheit, below safe survival temperature. A person sheltering there without emergency gear would be in serious danger. The Quonset cabin interior, 11 degrees Fahrenheit. Outdoor temperature at that moment, -54. Differential between Quonset interior and outdoor, 65 degrees. This was not a laboratory test. It was not peer-reviewed science. It was one Soviet-trained engineer with temperature loggers and 40 years of cold climate intuition. But the physics behind it are completely sound. 4 times the effective thermal resistance. Earth-sheltered walls cutting the temperature differential in half on the buried surfaces. A thermally massive slab, continuing to release stored energy across 4 straight days. The practical meaning for any Alaskan homesteader is stark. If your heat source fails, wet wood, empty propane tank, mechanical breakdown, the log cabin gives you perhaps 30 hours before interior temperatures become life-threatening. Victor's cabin gives you 96 hours. For days. Enough time to solve almost any problem. Enough time to survive almost any emergency. Victor does not call this engineering. He calls it respect for physics. How to build IT, the exact sequence. The build follows 5 steps. The sequence is non-negotiable. Each stage enables the next. Step 1, excavation and drainage. Dig the pit in summer, 4 to 5 feet deep. Install the French drain before anything else. Compact 8 inches of gravel into floor. This must be done before first frost. Miss this window, and you wait another year. Step 2, the insulated slab. Lay rigid foam on the gravel. Vapor barrier over foam. Rebar or wire mesh over the vapor barrier. Pour concrete. In remote Alaska, volumetric mixers or bag mix systems handle the job when ready-mix trucks cannot reach. Protect the cure with insulated blankets. A rush slab is a crack slab, and a crack slab is a failed thermal battery. Step 3, arch erection. The cold-formed steel panels arrive as flat coil stock. The forming machine rolls them on site. 2 to 4 people. No crane, no heavy lift equipment. Panels interlock and anchor to the slab perimeter with embedded bolts. A 30-foot span arch can be standing in 3 days. Step 4, spray foam. This is the most critical and the most specialized step. Closed cell first, direct to the steel, seamless and continuous. Then open cell on top to full depth. Total thickness, 12 inches minimum. R, 52 minimum. This step requires professional foam contractors in most cases. It is the largest single cost. It is also the step that creates the 65-degree differential. Step 5. Interior fit-out. Partitions, mechanical, windows and the end caps, doors, finished surfaces. Victor plastered his interior walls directly over the cured foam with a lime-based render. Warm, bright, slightly textured. Looks nothing like a military bunker. Looks like a home. Material cost for the full build, between $85,000 and $140,000, depending on location and system complexity. Comparable to a quality log cabin. The shell is weathertight in 2 to 3 weeks. Total build time for Victor, 11 weeks including interior finishing. What Alaska is learning from a Soviet engineer. Victor did not set out to teach anyone. He set out to be warm. But word travels in the Alaskan interior the way it always does, slowly, through winter visits, through neighbors who notice that one cabin on the ridge never has smoke coming from its chimney for more than a few hours a day, through builders who ask why Victor's fuel bill is 1/10 of theirs. Now, 3 years after Victor's test, there are 14 Quonset cabins built using variations of his method within a 200-mile radius of his property. Every one of them is reporting dramatic reductions in heating load. Every owner says the same thing. It feels different inside. Stable, quiet, solid in a way that log cabins never feel during a cold snap. There are challenges. Spray foam has real environmental costs. Some builders are experimenting with sheep's wool and cellulose as the bulk insulation layer, with thin closed-cell foam only at the vapor control layer. The results are promising, but not yet proven through enough extreme winters to draw confident conclusions. Window area is limited. The curved walls do not allow for the south-facing glazing of a passive solar design. Victor runs with 3 end-cap windows and 2 skylights. Enough light, enough solar gain to matter. But if you need glass walls and open views, this is not your design. Permitting is borough-dependent. Remote locations in Alaska often require no permit at all. Organized boroughs want stamped structural drawings. Victor, being a licensed engineer, stamped his own. What he is not apologizing for is the result. He is 69 years old. He grew up in Siberia. He has spent his entire adult life thinking about how structures survive extreme cold. And when he looks at the standard Alaskan cabin, the log walls, the box geometry, the uninsulated floor, the massive wood stove burning all night, he still says the same thing he said on day one. These people are heating the sky. The Quonset arch sits in the snow. Steam rises from the small exhaust flue. Inside, it is 65 degrees warmer than the world outside. Victor opens his outdoor refrigerator, the one nature provides for free, and pulls out dinner. He has beaten the cold, not by fighting it harder, by understanding it better. That is the Soviet way, Victor's own way, and now, slowly, the Alaskan way too.